area. All right. So I'm just going to step back in time a tiny little bit here, 2 weeks. No, maybe it's 3 weeks, but when we were talking about alternative medicine, before we got through all of these sources that we covered, different things, I started with Rambam, because we always want to see what Maimonides says. We say he was not just a physician, he was a physician, I mentioned not by choice, but because he had to take that job on in Egypt for royalty, for the Sultan of Cairo. He was a doctor. And he brought this interesting case up. Just to remind you, the case was, he said, if a rabid dog, a dog that has rabies, bites you and you get rabies, which was then a fatal disease. You couldn't go to North York General or Sunnybrook and get a vaccine or whatever we do today, that you died. They thought that in that case, there's nothing else we can do. We have a life and death situation. So Rambam brought this idea forward that they had this supernatural way, which they referred to as something called bederech segula. Segula means supernatural. Derech mean the way. Like we say, the derech, whatever it is, derech eretz means the way of the land, the way the people do it. Now, Rabbi Shaim once said it's Sudash Shlishi, derech eretz, and sometimes in Gemara ways actually means intermarital or marital relations. He says derech eretz means sex. I'm not. Oh, look! All of a sudden, everybody's paying attention when I say that. So, but derech eretz, in most cases, when people say have some derech eretz, it means be polite, be good, be a person of society, be a person who gets along. But Rambam was talking about doing things according to the laws of nature, and he said if it's segula, then that's considered supernatural, and that should be prohibited. That's what Rambam said. But you know what? Rambam lived then. He didn't live today. Like, look at today, we're learning on Zoom. He might have said, you can't learn on Zoom. You got to be a chavruta, one-on-one, sitting across, yelling at each other. So everything changed. So going past that, what Rambam came up with was two bottom lines. He said, there's two things. Either one of the things has to be something that would qualify for a medical therapy. So if you said this is a medical procedure, we're going to, whether it's medicine, whatever it is, but you have a human understanding to say this is why this would work. In other words, they said we're going to take a piece of the liver of the rabid dog, take the piece of liver from the rabid dog, we're going to feed it to you, and because you're eating the piece of liver from the rabid dog, that'll hopefully cure you. Hopefully, I would say, before you give me the piece of liver from the rabid dog, who did you give it to that it worked on? Well, nobody so far. Or you gave it to 8 people. Did it work on one of the 8? No, it didn't work on any of the 8, but that's all we know. Let me die. What's the point of eating it? It didn't work out of 8 out of 8. What's going to work on me? So that would be a supernatural attempt. There's no human understanding to why it would work. Now, if you came to me and said, we tried it on 8 people, it saved 3. I'd say, I hope I'm the 4th. At least there's a reason to go along with it. You tell me it worked on somebody. And the other thing Rambam said was that we need to have experience to demonstrate that it's true. Well, I already covered that. I said 3 out of 8 would be experience, not experience from the physician who's administering it. That's a whole different thing. I'd want that too today. I'd want to know, you know what? It's interesting. When someone's performing, I'll just use the example, heart surgery on you, they're giving you a bypass. You don't want to be wheeling in on the gurney into the room and the doctor says, congratulations, you're my first. Those aren't the words you want to hear. So they would never say that to you. So what they say is, Dr. Smith will be assisting Dr. Lawrence Williams today. Oh, so Dr. Smith is learning from Dr. Williams. He'll do a few procedures together with Dr. Williams, who is the experienced doctor. And then there's eventually someone has to be the first, right? But you're not really the first because you've had experience working with that doctor. So understanding in a human way and experience. So if that's what demonstrates whether or not something works or not, we went through Rambam, we talked about it, and he said that those are the 2 criteria. But then we spoke about the Radbaz, this great rabbi in Egypt around the time of the Shulchan Aruch. Just because the Mechaber, so Rabbi Yosef Karo was writing the Shulchan Aruch, doesn't mean he was the only game in town. He was the only guy that wrote a book. It just turns out that the Ramah, Moshe Isserles, was writing a book at the same time, but we won't get into that. But what happened was the Radbaz said, this great rabbi in Egypt, if non-Jews are doing it for a rational reason, then we're allowed to embrace those practices. In other words, why should it only be for the Goyim? Why should it only be for people who aren't Jewish that it works? No, but that's interesting take. How come when we were talking about saving a non-Jew on Shabbat, all of a sudden the Jews had an approach, well, I don't have to save them. They don't want to save me. I don't want to save them. We don't live together. They don't like me. I don't like them. That's not a good approach. So we said, we do it because of kindness. We want to help someone out of kindness. And they said, no, that's not the reason. It's not out of kindness. It's out of the fact that we don't want discord. We want to get along with other communities. But all of a sudden now, here's this Radbaz, the rabbi saying, well, if wearing garlic around the neck keeps the cancer away for so-and-so, and it works for the non-Jews, we should be able to embrace those practices too. So he had common sense. He said, hey, it's working for them. Let's try it. It should work for us too. Wouldn't that be considered a Gentile way? Wouldn't that be a way of embracing something like Avodah Zarah, a different kind of a way? John makes a point here. He says a tetanus shot seems like magic to a primitive person. That's correct. Absolutely. What seems magic to one person and who doesn't understand the reasoning behind something. That's why we say, Rambam said, you should have a human understanding. Look, if you're not intelligent, you're not able to understand what it is I'm explaining, that's a different story. But if you are able to understand it, and at least I can explain it in layman terms, I don't want to hear medical jargon. Sometimes I want to hear tachlis. I want to hear, tell me what it is that's wrong with me in plain layman's terms so I understand what it is that I might be able to do to help myself. But the idea is can we embrace something that is considered magic, an amulet that's worn around your neck? We talked about magnetic bracelets that people thought will help you with arthritis. And I said, if you believe it, maybe it actually works. If you believe in something so strongly that it works, I could give you, I don't know, I'll call it a sugar pill. You've never seen it before in your life. It's a striped red and white mint candy, like the kind you get in shul, but you've never had one before. And I take that candy and you say, I have a headache. I go, oh, really? Take this mint striped candy. Whenever I have a headache, I take this candy. It always works. My headache goes away. Well, you're trusting me. You believe that. So you take the mint candy and the headache goes away. Did the headache go away because you drank a glass of water and you were dehydrated to wash the candy down? Maybe it was the water that got rid of the headache. Maybe you were dehydrated, but you don't know. Although as you took the mint candy, your headache went away. And now you're telling all your friends, Marshall came up with this brilliant idea. You got a headache, you eat a mint candy, the headache goes away. Next person takes the candy and they go, didn't work for me. So there has to be a human. Why did the candy help your headache? Explain it to me. Well, I took sugar and sugar caused me to have inflammation and the inflammation caused me to be feeling tired and I went to bed and it made me forget about the headache. I don't know. Like, I'm just saying, you know what I mean? Like, so you're going to come up with a reason. Well, moving forward, we have to look. I promised you the last time that when we were talking last week, I wasn't here. I was in Crown Heights on a live classes in Crown Heights, an interesting neighborhood in Brooklyn. I just loved it. Sitting in the yeshiva and learning in person was a beautiful thing. And they were very welcoming, I have to say. It was very interesting. But why wouldn't they be? So anyway, when you sit and you learn halacha in yeshiva, most often it's Mechaber Ramah Shachtaz and a machloket between the Maharshal, maybe the Rashba. You don't hear too much about the modern poskim because that's not what they're interested in, because that's not how we follow law necessarily from those times. But we look today at what the modern poskim say. So, if we look at Rav Moshe Feinstein was actually born, I think, in Lithuania, and he was called Moshe. It's actually pronounced Moshe Feinstein. So a Feinstein is a fine jewel, a fine stone, right? And he was an American Orthodox rabbi, scholar, posek. He was a halachic authority. He's a heavyweight. His rulings were very important, and his book of Sheilot Utshuvot, called the Igrot Moshe, are incredible. They're only in Hebrew with a few Yiddish words in it. They don't have a set with nekudot. You don't have a set with vowels. You have to be able to read without vowels because, but the Igrot Moshe, I almost bought a set last week, but I was saying and holding it in my hand. I was in a bookstore and I said, am I really going to use it and look everything up? We're spoiled. We have Sefaria. Has anybody used Sefaria here? No. John has. I encourage everyone to download it. It's free. You can pay a membership and get the whole thing. But everything that I'm teaching you, you don't need me anymore. You don't have to come to my classes. You can learn it on Sefaria. They have everything. They have everything that you want to know. If you want to look up the Rashba, they got the Rashba. Look under Halachic, look under Torah, look under Gemara, look at whatever it is you're looking for. It's all there. Most of it in Hebrew and English, but some things are not in English. I don't think the Igrot Moshe is in English, but one day somebody will publish it that way. But Moshe Feinstein, he ruled on a lot of different things that we look at today as halachic rulings that are in his responses that didn't always agree. Now, he would defer to, by the way, he was a contemporary to Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. So because he was a contemporary to Shlomo Zalman, they would have discussions and they didn't always agree, but most of the time they were on the same page. But the Tzitz Eliezer, Rav Eliezer Yehuda Waldenberg in Eretz Yisroel in Yerushalayim, he would go say, this is a case, we talked about the case of the woman who needed to have an abortion because she was so depressed, she was considering taking her own life. And Moshe Feinstein said, you need to speak to Rav Waldenberg and let him make a decision. He made a decision and said it was correct to do it in that time. But these are the areas that Moshe Feinstein ruled on. Artificial insemination. We talked about that over a year ago in the rulings. He was a heavyweight on that. He went along with it, but he wasn't in such agreement. He said it's got to be a halachic authority in the hospital itself. It's got to be a halachic hospital, a Torah observant hospital like Shari Tzedek that would have a halachic authority to see, because you don't want to have a brother marrying a sister from the same fertilization. You don't want to have that kind of marriages. If two people find each other, they're both Jewish, they marry each other and find out that the father was the same father. We don't want a Jerry Springer episode. So there was that. Then there was his thoughts on cosmetic surgery. He was he was an advocate for Chalav Yisroel. Do anybody know Chalav Yisroel? Like milk that is where the cows are watched and we know what they ate. Moshe Feinstein said, all milk that's made in any commercial place is kosher. You don't have to have Chalav Yisroel. But he said, but if it's available, maybe you should buy it. Brachot aleihem. If you blessings will come upon you if you buy it and you have that and you want to be more strict for yourself. But you want to know something? This is what's interesting. For many years, I don't know about now, but going back in the early days when Chalav Yisroel came to Toronto, because I remember before 1970s, it wasn't here. It came probably around the time Rochamed probably came when you came to Toronto, and that's when Chalav Yisroel was here. It wasn't even here then. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But, the Reichman family supported the agency that was putting out the Chalav Yisroel. They gave a lot of money. Why? Because they felt it was important. So it reduced the price. So if you actually went to look at a jug of Chalav Yisroel, it would be whatever, 3 cents cheaper than buying seal test milk. So people would buy it and say, well, if Chalav Yisroel is cheaper than buying the other box of milk, I'll buy it if it's cheaper, but I'm not paying more money for it. So that's why they supported it. So there was that. I don't know if that's the case anymore today. But, there was a time back in the 1970s before we had Migdal cheese and things like that came from Israel originally, and Tenuva and all these companies. We didn't have that. Modern Orthodox people would eat hard cheeses that weren't kosher, not soft cheeses. They would eat hard cheeses. I'm making that clear. In Toronto, anyway, a lot of them would eat Black Diamond, Kraft. They took a blocks of cheddar cheese, grate it up, and make your macaroni and cheese. And that was it. Why? Because the rennet from the sheep's lining of the stomach was mechanically reproduced to resemble something else. And it was then referred to as a davar chadash. Does anybody remember Danny Allman? He passed away just a couple months ago. A very dear friend of mine. I got to see him last year in Israel at a wedding. He had worked at one time many years ago before he was the ritual director at Beth Emet with a cheese factory. And he explained to me about the Davar Chadash. It was fascinating. And when he told me all about it and what the reasons were that we could eat that rennet, because he said, the Gemara says, if a dog won't eat it, by the way, if you took regurgitated like that crap, that rennet, and you put it on the floor, even a dog would probably turn its nose up. Although my dog would probably eat it, because Quincy will eat anything. But they say if a dog won't eat it, you can mamish eat it. You can have it. It's interesting. I would hope my dog wouldn't eat the bacon strips, then I could eat that too, maybe, but it doesn't work like that. So Moshe Feinstein was an authority on heart transplants. He was an authority on cheating on exams. Very interesting in yeshiva. So what about today, these new programs that they have that you can insert everything and it gives you a paper? The universities now have developed software where they can scan the paper and see whether it came out from one of those programs or not. So you won't be able to get away with it. He puskined a ruling on conservative Judaism. It wasn't very pretty. Including, by the way, the clergy and the schools, because he didn't like the schools because they were teaching modern ways. So he reprimanded the conservative Judaism for the ways of teaching schools. He said that you're not allowed to donate blood for pay. He said you can do it, but you shouldn't be getting paid for it. Unless there's a makam tzorach. There's always a case where there's like a need, a reason for, I guess, somebody's doing it because they have to put food on the table. So maybe then he would say if there's a makam tzorach, a time of need, or no, you wouldn't say makam tzorach. You would say a hefsed meruba. A hefsed meruba means a monetary loss on your part. You're giving up your time to go and give blood so you can get paid to feed your family. That's referred to as a hefsed meruba. These are all halachic terms that you learn when you learn. He was an authority on Eruvim. So, we have to have an Eruv. Look, I have a cottage up north in the middle of Yechupet's land. Am I allowed to carry a tray of food to the water's edge from my cottage if it's Shabbat? I don't have an Eruv and Christmas sturgeon falls up north. Well, you're allowed on your own property, but you can't cross over to the boundary and take over to the neighbors. It's interesting. I have a fence. I can't go past the fence line because you can carry on your own property, but because there's no Eruv in that town. We have an Eruv in Toronto, so we can carry our talit bag, we can carry your purse, you can carry your whatever it is you want, your knapsack, to shul. Many people carry knapsacks to shul. Their stuff is in it, their tikkun, their whatever it is. So he puskined on psychiatric care. He puskined on a case once where there was a separation needed for joined twins. Very interesting. What if one twin is going to die in the separation to save another one? He puskined on shaking hands. Well, shaking hands between men and men are okay, women and women. But what about shaking hands with a woman? You shake hands with a woman, no, they put their hands behind their back. Really, he said, you don't have to do that. Because if you're shaking hands with somebody and the woman doesn't know better and she puts out her hand, the polite thing to do is to shake her hand. He didn't feel that just shaking your hand is going to lead to dancing, as they say. He puskined on that case, which he was in a debate with Eliezer Waldenberg on the Tay-Sachs baby. We talked about the Tay-Sachs case with the mother. I referred to that. But when he puskined on that case, he said, I'll defer to whatever Waldenberg says, even though I don't think that she should have the abortion, but I know I'm not the expert. And he puskined on something which I find very interesting today. And if he was around today, he'd be doing a lot more on this issue. And that was veal, the issue of raising veal in those factory conditions where they were milk feeding them and not treating the animals correctly. So really on animal, he felt that was animal cruelty to keep an animal in a stall and just milk feed them until they're slaughtered. And what kind of a life is that? So I wonder what he would say about the egg market today. You know, I feel much better buying eggs since I've learned more from chickens that are at least, even if they're not free range, at least they're in larger cages. You know what I mean? I don't like this business where in their little cage like this, they can't move, they can't even turn around, and we're just drawing eggs from them. First of all, you don't get as much omega-3. It's not as healthy for you. And secondly, I think it's cruelty to animals, and we're supporting that industry. Every time we buy a dozen eggs and we are supporting an industry where us as a people should be better than that. We're supposed to be better than that. So I'm just as guilty as everybody else because I bought the eggs too, but we should be a better people than that. But look at this idea now. What does Moshe Feinstein say? He says that in alternative medicines, outside of what is taught in medical schools is disqualified as being tried and true. So if it's taught in a medical school, it's okay. If it's not taught in a medical school, it's not okay. Now, I'm just going forward in a sentence of my own here because Beth is going to tell me to stay on track, which I'm going to try and do. But I can tell you that we didn't have alternative medicine schools early on. We do now. And do you know what? I would suggest that many really good doctors work together with doctors in alternative medicine, and they're open-minded enough to find that there may be things that they didn't learn at McMaster that might help somebody. Don't forget, if Bernie Shimmer was here, he would say most medicines, unless they're synthetic, are plant derivative based. They come from plants. So if that's true, well, you learn that, I guess, in organic chemistry, then we have to think about alternative medicine and things that come from plant-based that can help you or harm you. Think about the case of you're taking Coumadin or a blood thinner, and you don't know because your doctor doesn't tell you that you shouldn't be loading up on dark leafy green vegetables because they have vitamin K, and vitamin K causes coagulation in the blood and thickens your blood, and now you have a heart attack or a stroke because you never knew this, and you're eating 5 pounds of kale every day or dark lettuce. You have to adjust your Coumadin dose if you're going to be eating a dark green leafy salad every day. And I just gave you some medical advice. I'm not supposed to give you medical advice, but I would say I'm not giving you medical advice. Speak to your doctor about it if you're on a blood thinner and you are having heavy, rich things with vitamin K. But Moshe Feinstein said, he asked himself this question. I'm going to quote this to you. Listen to this. He says, what do I mean irrational? What's wrong with an irrational thought lying at the base of medical theory? Anyone who employs a medical practice which is not rooted in human reasoning is promoting irrationality, and anyone who promotes irrationality is at risk of falling into non-Jewish religious practices. Then he says, that's dangerous and it's bad. You have to live your lives according to human reasoning, and anything else is spiritually dangerous. Using these remedies will lead to a denial of laws of nature, which God imprinted in the universe. I don't remember the pasuk that said those words imprinted in the universe, but I believe Moshe Feinstein took those words from somewhere else. and use those words imprinted of the universe. I have to go back in my binders and see who said that, because that rings a bell to me that somebody said that. I'm talking about one of the Rishonim said the laws of nature are imprinted in the universe. It could be Rambam. I'd have to say, I don't want to say until I look it up. But Moshe Feinstein said, when God created the universe, God imprinted the laws of nature, and anyone who employs a supernatural remedy or an alternative medical practice is denying God's creation of the world. That's a big statement. That's a heavyweight statement to say, if you are taking an alternative medical practice, you're denying that God created the world. You're saying this medical practice that we figured out but is that really what we follow? That's what we're going to get to, because who gave the doctors, I always say, the understanding, the ability to learn what they learn? God. Hakol mina shamayim, right? So therefore, what Moshe Feinstein is saying so far is he's saying that it's forbidden. It's asur to use alternative therapy. It's prohibited. Now, what Rav Moshe has clearly embraced here is a rational view. What he's saying to us is that the thinking of Rambam, according to this, any other view is considered denying God's creation. Any other view, because it isn't imprinted in the laws of nature. Well, I think what we have to look at is we have to look to see if there's a different approach to alternative therapies, and see what the thinking of the rabbis are who are more comfortable with the practices. Because what we're seeing up to now is that the authorities, the poskim, are in opposition to alternative treatments because they're not tried and true. And Moshe Feinstein is certainly opposed to them because of the laws not being imprinted. The laws are imprinted of nature, and anyone who embraces alternative medicine, which aren't part of those laws, are denying God's creation. Well, here's a really strict a way that we would not follow. I'm going to tell you that right from the beginning because I'm not going to shock you. I want to just tell you, like, there's a Rabbi Morgenstern. He in a publication of Rav Eliashev's very strict to the right approach, he wrote these words. Now, this was a sign. When I say a sign, not a sign from God, a sign, like somebody makes a sign and they post it up because they don't want you to do things. So where do you see signs like that about halacha? From neighborhoods. If you go to Bnei Brak and you walk around Bnei Brak, or you walk around
in Mea Shearim.
Mea Shearim. That's, how do you know? I'm looking for that name right in my head. That's exactly what I wanted to say, and I couldn't think of it. Exactly. So if you haven't, you should. But when you walk through Mea Shearim, please dress sneud stick, dress appropriate, put on a proper skirt, put on proper, because you don't want to be, you want to fit in with the community. By the way, there's nothing wrong with fitting in with the community. There's nothing wrong with feeling that you're part of something rather than trying to be in opposition, because then you don't get treated nicely because they don't look at you the same way. And I think it's not, it would be nice if they treated you nicely if you didn't dress the way they want. But let's face it, if I was a woman, I wouldn't want to wear a mini skirt walking around Mea Shearim. First of all, they won't let you in their stores and you won't be able to buy anything and you won't have a good experience. So I'd say have a good experience. I'm not wearing a mini skirt anyway. That would be too funny, but maybe I should. I don't know. Anyway, so here's what happened. There was a sign hanging in Ramat Shlomo. So Ramat Shlomo is named after Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. They named the area after him because he's a giant. He's a gadol. And Ramat Shlomo is a neighborhood very much like Mea Shearim. And Ramat Shlomo, Rav Fink, my teacher on this course, always referred to it during his classes as my holy neighborhood. And I would laugh every time he would say that because he would come up with an idea. Somebody would ask a question. Can I kosher my microwave for Pesach. And he would say, ask your rabbi. Don't ask me. I'm not your shul rabbi. I love that about him because he was a believer. He's a modern thinking from rabbi, but he thinks outside the box in a modern approach. He knows that people come from all walks of life, whether you're conservative, whether you're reformed. I had a PhD from Vienna in my class, and she was a professor in Judaic studies. And maybe she's not Orthodox, maybe she's Reform. He doesn't know. But he say, ask your community Rav. I'm not your community Rav. But then they would ask him, they'd push him and they'd say, yeah, but what do you do? He'd say, in my holy neighborhood, we don't, and he would say it like this, in my holy neighborhood, we don't kosher microwaves. And the reason he said you don't kosher a microwave for Pesach actually makes sense. He said, today they're very cheap. So you can buy a microwave for $89 at Walmart. He said, if you can't afford the $89 to buy the microwave, don't use a microwave for 1 week. Big deal. Do you really need to use a microwave for 1 week? You lived without it for so many years growing up. What would be the big deal not to use it? He said, koshering a microwave, there is zaya, steam, which rises into the cabinet of the microwave and trafes it up. So he said, you can never take the whole thing apart and get up inside the walls of the microwave to clean it. Therefore, don't bother koshering it. Conservative Judaism says if you take a glass of water and you boil the glass of water in the microwave, then the steam rises from the glass of water that koshers it. And he said, do you really want to believe that? So he would say you don't do it. I grew up when we first had our first microwave, it was probably 1985. We were late bloomers. I didn't get color TV till probably 78 or something, but my father didn't spend money on those things. We didn't have it. But I remember getting the first microwave, and my father asked Rabbi Joseph Kelman, can we kosher a microwave? And he said, you can kosher it with a glass of water. Rabbi Schneider, who was a Yeshiva University graduate, also said you can kosher it with a glass of water, and he's a YU rabbi. So I follow that if you want to kosher it, you can do it. That's what our community does. But in Ramat Shlomo, they're not doing that. But what does Rav Morgenstern say? He said, I want to tell you about a sign that was hung up in Ramat Shlomo when I was walking around. So listen to this. Rav Morgenstern was a student of Rav Eliashiv. Rav Eliashiv was a great scholar in Jerusalem. Rav Morgenstern was entirely reputable, and his words are the words of Rav Eliashiv's with his permission. He took permission. So listen to this. You can't use any alternative therapy which have their source in idolatrous religion. These are alternative practices which work because of their idolatrous practices, and therefore they're forbidden. The only time you're permitted to use these practices, if they're idolatrous, is if they can be proven that they are effective, not on the basis of idolatrous powers, only if they can be proven that they are effective on the basis of idolatrous powers, only if they can be proven if they're working on the basis of nature. So if it's working on the basis of nature, and you come up with a reason and say, yeah, they use it for idolatrous driving. But if you take, cloves, and you mix the cloves with garlic and you drink it, your cold will go away. So then he's saying, well, is that an alternative practice? Or if he says, we can see with the laws of nature that because we have a magnetic force, because we're on the planet Earth coordinated with the moon, and the moon creates a magnetic force on us, and we're between the sun and the whatever, and we have a force, and you can wear a magnet then because the magnet picks up the force. It's part of nature, this magnetic force, and therefore it'll take away my arthritis. You're finding a way to explain it. I'm not a scientist, John, so John's looking at me like I'm a complete idiot for saying what I said. But what I'm saying, John, is that if I asked you to explain magnetic forces, John would do it eloquently and perfectly because John knows everything about everything. I'd sit at the breakfast table with him and he knows a little bit about everything, and he knows a lot about engineering and science. But what I'm saying is it has to be some kind of proof. So what he's saying is, I am not using the power of idols or the idolatrous gods, or I'm just using the laws of nature, which those idolatrous discovered. So people that practice idolatry, they discover something. Well, I'm not inheriting their beliefs just because I'm using their practice that happens to work. He says this is insufficient. We have to be suspicious that what is underlying on the practice is an act of magic, and therefore it must be prohibited. Bottom line, he says that all of these alternative practices, whether they are Reiki, whether it's acupuncture, whether it's reflexology, whether it's a chiropractic procedure, all of them carry with them a suspicion that the practitioner, the person giving you this treatment, is performing some kind of engaging in magic. This is what this Rob Morgenstern said. It's all magic. None of it works. There is no particular reason to trust them. Not only do we suspect them of being guilty or practicing magic, but they're also guilty of forms of supernatural behavior. Therefore, he says, the whole realm of these therapies are completely prohibited, and they imitate ways outside of our community. And unless there is a rational reason for what they do, then of course we can follow this behavior. Well, this attitude of the poskim up till now to the prohibition of using magic, the Torah prohibits magic. The Torah does prohibit magic. The prohibition of magic is understood in one of two ways. One way is it depends on the attitude of the specific Rav. The understanding is separated in two different ways. One possibility is there is such a thing as magic in the world. If I ask you, is there magic in the world? Some of you might think yes. You don't think there's magic in the world, Esther?
No.
Really? You think everything is explained by science all the time?
I think everything can be explained if we know enough. I don't think there's magic. I don't believe in that.
So you believe in kinetic energy. If I stare at something and I'm upset and the glass moves across the dining room table, then that is not magic. It's
I don't consider anything magic, and the fact that we cannot explain it right now doesn't mean that it's magic.
okay. So if there is such a thing as magic, let's say for a minute, just to take the opposite side from you, and it works, we can't explain it. We can't explain it. So there's no explanation. No scientist, no great in the world can explain it. One possibility is there's magic. The other possibility is there isn't any magic. So Esther's taking the side, there's no magic in the world. So here's the thing. If there is such a thing as magic and it really works, that is what the Torah is prohibiting. If there is such a thing as magic, that is what's prohibited. On the other hand, a stage performer in Las Vegas, someone on the stage, and they do a magic show. I don't know the names of the people, but you probably know the greats better. Brenda's going to ask a question in a second. On the other hand, you have that stage performer and they say they're doing a magic show. He's using sleight of hand, okay? So he's able to pull the rabbit out of the pocket or whatever he's doing. It's all sleight of hand. The Torah is only prohibiting real magic. Is that real magic or is that just a show? Go ahead, Brenda.
I don't believe in using the word magic either, but I do believe in there are certain things that are completely inexplicable. And if you're talking about magic shows,
right,
you're talking about, someone like David Copperfield, he's really good at whatever it is he does. And he's so good that everybody believes that what he's doing is actually true. But there's always, I believe you always have to question everything.
That's right. So if David Copperfield, well, this is the problem we have with some of the hands-on and healing. I I always enjoyed watching evangelical ministers on TV. I'm crazy that way. I always love them. Why? Because they're great orators, they're great speakers, the way they use their body language, their hands. So there was a man, he died at about 99 years old, about a year or two ago. You remember him from TV in the 70s and 80s. He always wore the matching coordinated suits with the matching pocket. His name was Ernest Angley.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, what a name. By the way, that was his real name.
His real name.
His real name. His parents named him Ernest, which makes you sound trustworthy. Angley sounds like you're an angel. His name was Ernest Angley. And he would say he healed people. They would come to him, you're deaf. And he would touch them and say, you're healed. And they'd fall backwards in this trance, and they would fall into the people holding them in their arms. And they'd say, speak, speak. And they would speak. Or the man would come in with a cane, and then they'd throw away the cane and he'd walk. And people said, it's all fraud. And they're paying people this, and they're coming in or whatever it is. And then simple, it's not a fraud. He's making people. If David Copperfield, if you will, use his name, I'm just saying it as a for the class, somebody like that, all of a sudden said, you know what? Not only I can do a show in Vegas, but I can cure this disease. There's no explaining why he can cure the disease, but he can cure it. And I happen to, God forbid, have that disease. I don't know if I need an explanation. If he can cure it and he calls it magic, I might want to go see him because he can cure it. He's calling it magic. All I know is I don't want the disease. I don't care how you get rid of it. I'll go and see anybody, and so will anybody in this room, if we knew that it would actually, in fact, work. Because just because we can't explain it, I don't want to have it. You know, like imagine if that David Copperfield could cure COVID like that and get rid of it. I would run to him and say, I'll never get it. I don't need the vaccine. I'd rather go see David Copperfield. I don't need it. I don't want it. I think it's, I would trust magic, for me personally, only because, just because it can't be explained, there must be an explanation somewhere out there for it. So, but it's an interesting thought. See, even though Rob Morgenstern is taking this hard line to the right, and we know that this isn't how we really poskin. I'm not going to make you wait 10 weeks to hear that, okay? But the thing is that why is it that we have found ways, because we always do find ways, we're Jews, we always look for a way to find a way to make things work for us in the society, in the world, find acceptance to practices that help us. So there's two things here. One, there are those where the practitioner separated himself from the original Avodah Zarah and is claiming that everything is working according to forces of nature. Well, that's okay. But we suspect that it's not true, and it's an act of magic. So then we would have to forbid it. Even if he says, I'm working according to the laws of nature, and you suspect, no, there's some magic going on, I don't trust that, you're not supposed to engage in it. Then two, alternatively, there are those practitioners who have not separated themselves from the original idolatrous practices, which underlie alternative therapies, and they have the additional prohibition of also being idolatrous in nature. So there's a bottom line here with this posek, and that is that all of the alternative practices are completely forbidden. They're prohibited because they might be working with magic powers, and whatever they're involved in, don't get involved in it. And this was a poster that was found in Yerushalayim in Ramat Shlomo that was interesting. He wanted to share it, but what happened was when Rav Fink showed us the poster, it was being used at a Haredi camp, at an ultra-Orthodox. I don't even like the word ultra-Orthodox really, but there is such a thing. I mean, ultra meaning really stringent to the right camp that had a poster that said that they must be careful of any kind of practices like that. Now, to be a family, you can't engage. What the mother, let's say, is going for alternative therapy or medical practices, they'd have to keep that under wrap. Do you know somebody will snitch on this child's mother and say, I saw Mrs. Bloomfeld, and she was going in to see the chiropractor, and their daughter Adina is in this camp. This goes on today. So you have schools like Tiferes Beis Yaakov in Toronto. You're not allowed to have computers accessible with internet to your children and send them to that school. So you can't have internet. They don't want the children coming home and looking things up on the internet. They're looking up, I don't know, Rambam, and all of a sudden they come across a site that you don't want them to look at. So they forbid it. So people, you can, I was in the marshal's house and he had internet. He shouldn't let his children come to this school. It's not. So being part of a community is very serious when you're in a strict situation. So here is a different strict thought. We're going to get to all the leniencies. I don't have to tell you, we're very lenient. Don't worry. You don't have to quit your practitioner. You can go to whoever you want, all right? Don't phone them up today and say you have to quit. Harav Shlomo, it's just interesting to learn what the strict authorities said. So Rav Shlomo Avner was a rabbinic scholar, very Zionist though, very, very Zionist, which is unusual. But he's a national Zionist rabbi, but very strict. And he quotes Ramban, and he says, according to Ramban, this becomes the psak of the Shulchan Aruch. It's prohibited to engage in medical practice unless you are an expert in healing. Anyone who is not a professional is not allowed to practice medicine, period. Shulchan Aruch has nothing to say about secular professions. Shulchan Aruch has a lot to say about who is a qualified rabbi, a mohel, or to sit on a beit din, a scribe. These professions are all qualified and regulated by the Shulchan Aruch. The only secular profession that the Shulchan Aruch and the poskim are concerned with and say anything about is medical practice. According to the Shulchan Aruch, it is prohibited to engage in healing someone if someone is more competent is available. It doesn't matter whether you're a doctor, a dentist, a surgeon, a nurse, or one of the healing arts. If the practitioner is performing a diagnosis or a treatment, which he or she can do as well as anyone else in the field, they're allowed to do it. But if there's someone better available, then you should do it. So this imposes a halachic burden on the medical professional. You have to be so well trained at whatever it is that you're going to do. Otherwise, you have to refer the patient to the person that can do it better. So what Ramban and the Shulchan Aruch follow is based on this. Rav Avner concludes that every single practitioner of medicine has to act in accord with the best information available in the generation that you are practicing. That's kind of what John Gooderman was saying when it came to the rabid thing. You were saying that whatever is available today wasn't available then. When they're pusketing then, they didn't have the practices that we have or the knowledge that we have today. Like, I got to tell you, I had a foot problem. I told you one time I had plantar fasciitis. I couldn't get rid of it. I didn't know what to do. My foot hurt. And this chiropractor that I knew said to me, he can help me. And I don't go to chiropractors. I need him. Thank God. I don't go. I don't even know if I don't know. Anyway, it hurt so much. I had nothing to lose. So I went to him and he treated it by massaging out these knots in the foot. All I know is it went away. Did it go away because I saw him 6 weeks, twice a week for 6 weeks? And during that 6 weeks, my foot just healed by itself? I don't think so, because I had this for over a year and it didn't get better and it didn't go away. So I don't think it magically, if I use that word magic, went away in 6 weeks just because, that extra 6 weeks made a difference in the year. He did something to help my foot to make it go better. My doctor didn't offer me that. I went to him first. He's a good doctor. I like him. I went to him. I said, what can you do? Go see someone. He'll make you insoles, which I never wear, that I paid $300 for, and they sit in my drawer upstairs getting dusty. I wore them, they hurt my feet. So I stopped wearing them and I wore running shoes, and that helped. It felt better. But what I discovered with this guy, got this chiropractor, that my doctor said, sure, go see him if you want. I think he just wanted to get rid of me already. Don't come and complain to me about your sore foot anymore. You want to see him, go see him. He got rid of it. He helped me. So he has proper training as a chiropractor. He went to chiropractic college where he has a license to practice. So he's a professional. He happened to be Jewish, but let's say he wasn't Jewish. Let's say he was, I don't know, he was African. He came from Africa. I didn't ask him, do you practice idolatrous practices at home? I didn't ask him. I don't want to know. I don't care. He wasn't davening over my foot, he was massaging the knots out. So he has license. So furthermore, it's only in the later history, and this is where John Gooderman was 100% correct, that it's really only in our recent history of medicine and science that we've kind of figured out different ways to do precise, controlled experiments to figure out if something works or something doesn't work. And we have a long way to go. And I'm sure I'd love to know what's going to be in 200 years from now with treatments, especially for cancer, I have to say, because they're making gains, but the gains are tiny. I listen to the phone calls all the time in the other room here because my wife works for a company doing drug development on head and neck cancers. And when I hear the phone calls and they say, this was a great success, we have 3 patients on the study who have lived 3 months longer than they were told they would live. I went, 3 months? That's the best you can do, 3 months. And they go, that you don't understand, that's huge. Because 3 months might lead to 3 years soon with the proper whatever it is we have to do. The science and genetic testing and all, it's getting better and better. And hopefully 3 months will turn into 3 years or 30 years, I don't think it should turn into 300 years because the problem then is we're going to have too many people in the world, right? Although I wouldn't mind being around in 300 years to see what we're flying around in the sky. We never see enough of the world, right? But licensing, the person went to school and they studied and they learned. I wouldn't call that magic. So in the state of medicine, if you go to the Far East, it says in my notes here, which is the origin of many alternative practices, the state of medicine is so disastrous and the life expectancy is far lower than in places of Western medicine. So I didn't believe that necessarily when I heard that. So I went online and I started looking at other countries. When I was a little kid, the life expectancy for a man was 78. I remember that. And when you're 20 years old or 15, you don't worry about 78 because I got a long time to worry about 78. Right now, I don't have so long to worry about 78. And many of you are way past 78, way past Kanena Hora. So I think the idea becomes, what is it today? The life expectancy for a man went up to about 84, 85. Many of us surpassed that. And I heard that after COVID, in another few years from now, it might go back down 2 years to 82 or something like this. I don't know. But when you look up other countries and see what their life expectancy is, look up the life expectancy in North Korea. Many men die when they're 62. We don't hear about it. We don't think about it because we don't look, we don't care. We only think about what's going on in Toronto here, or in Eretz Yisroel, where they have proper doctors and medicine and great hospitals, best in the world. In the whole world out there, not everybody lives to be 100, except Rochama will live to be 120 for sure. That's for sure. And yeah, I say that as jokingly because Rochama, you always look the same. You never age to me. You always look the same. I've known you since I'm 15, and you haven't changed. I said to Rochama, she said, we're going to do a tribute next year for Grisha, for Louis Danto. We have to do a concert. I hope COVID will end. And I said, we'll do it when it turns to whatever the so-and-so you're saying 5 years. She said to me, I won't be around then. I didn't know what your age was. And then I said to her, you'll be around. Don't worry about it.
Well, I want to tell you that in another 2 months, I will be 90.
Does anybody believe that?
No, absolutely not.
Not
Kamina Hora.
in a
Muhammad,
million
you look,
years.
you're amazing.
You're teaching,
Wow.
you're going to be 90, you're going to go to at least 120, at least, unbelievable. So,
Unbelievable.
so
Wow.
unbelievable, Rochama. So anyway, so the alternative practices that Shlomo Avner and Rav Sternberg, what they were talking about were practices that we wouldn't be able to explain and we wouldn't be able to do them. The bottom line they're saying is if there's a standard doctor, your regular ordinary, the guy that went to University of Toronto or McMaster or Ottawa, wherever they went, and they studied medicine, and they see no danger in the alternative practice, and it will not harm you, then they're doing a little bit of a flip. And Rav Avner is saying, if the standard doctor studied medicine says there's no danger in alternative practice and it won't harm you, you're allowed to do things which will not harm you. But you need the professional in the medicine's approval and the physician's approval. This is a problem. I'll tell you why in a minute. If the physician who has studied standard medicine said it will harm you, then it's forbidden. Here we have another voice in opposition. His oppositional approach and reasoning is, one, the healer doesn't fulfill the halachic requirement in order to practice medicine. Maybe the person is not trained or licensed, maybe. Or two, it doesn't work very well. Well, it worked on one person, but it didn't work on 72 others. If he opens up the door, Rav Avner, a little bit, he's afraid of the floodgates. He said a little bit is too much. It's already harmless. It's, he's afraid. But what he's saying is, if your doctor says it's okay, it's okay. If your doctor doesn't say it's okay, it's not okay. Well, think about the 1980s and how the view was by standard medical professionals towards alternative medicine was then. And think about what it is to a young doctor who just graduated today. They have a different approach and a different thought, and they're taught differently in the schools today on the ideas and the openness to alternative medicine than it was back then. You know, my doctor, he's an old guy. He's already 70 years old or 70 something. But when he went to school, they were told, chiropractors, those are the people that didn't go to medical school. What do they know? They're not real doctors. Don't let them touch your back. They'll hurt your back. And then you'll be really sorry. It's not necessarily true. Chiropractors learn a lot about physiology and how to massage therapy, things that doctors don't learn. And I'll give you an example just from a veterinarian point of view. When a veterinarian goes to school in Guelph, they're given, when it comes to nutrition on animals, and I was told this by my veterinarian, that's how I know this, this isn't me making it up, 1 or 2 days on nutrition. They don't spend time. There's too many anatomies to learn. You have to know the anatomy of a rat. You have to know the anatomy of a pig. You have to know the anatomy of a cow. You have to know the anatomy of a dog and a cat and a lizard, whatever. So there's birds, then you might find your specialty. It's not like a human. We have one anatomy. I have a heart. You have a heart. You have a kidney. You have 2 kidneys. I have 2 kidneys. When you have an animal, they're all different to a certain degree. I believe that nutrition is very important. What you feed your pet, a higher quality food. I don't want to badmouth any brands, but think of the brand, the cheapest brand of dog food in the can, and think of that name, and think it's 29 cents a can. Esther, which brand am I thinking of? I want to see if you know.
Alpo?
That's exactly what was in my head. I knew that you're laughing and smiling. So I'm not bad mouthing Alpo. If that's what my dog is going to eat, that's going to eat that. I'm just saying, or think of a higher quality food. Not everybody can spend a fortune on dog food. I mean, many dogs probably by the way, I don't know if it's even true. You know, look, my father ate Wurst and eggs and lived to be 86 with a bad heart. He ate cookies, he ate cake, he ate candy, he ate rochama. You know my dad, he ate everything. He ate a bagel every morning at breakfast. And by the way, they say you're only allowed to have 2 drinks a week now or you'll get cancer. My dad had a schnapps every single morning in shul, and he's still with a bad heart. And AFib, he lived to be 86. I didn't watch him eating so healthily. You know, he'd boil up hot dogs and he would eat this processed meat. They say processed meat will give you colon cancer. He didn't get it. He died of a congestive heart failure in the end because he had a weak heart to begin with. So if he didn't eat hot dogs and he didn't eat Wurst and he didn't eat the potato chips and he didn't have the schnapps, you know, Dayenu, as we say in Pesach, what would he have lived longer? 86 and a half.
You
I don't
wouldn't have
know.
been happy though.
And exactly. So that's why we have to fall off the wagon sometimes, Esther, and have our dose of cake or sugar, get it, and then get back on track. I do it. We sometimes we're allowed to indulge and say, to hell with it today, I'm having a chocolate. I'm telling you right now, because you know what? On your matzeva, someday it's not going to say she didn't have a chocolate her whole life. Nobody's going to care. So what I'm saying is we don't have to have a row, and that's hard for me, a layer, never mind a row. But if you eat the layer of chocolates, eat them. Tomorrow, don't have any chocolates, you know, but with moderation, I think. But we know things today that we didn't know then. And Rav Moshe Feinstein was against any form of this alternative medicine. He's not here today. Doctors are learning differently. So what did Moshe Feinstein probably do? He was a very intelligent man. I didn't know him. I wish I did. He probably spoke to doctors in the religious Orthodox community. You know, he probably talked to these doctors and asked them. And they said to him, we didn't learn about that in school. Moshe Feinstein, you didn't learn it in school. We're not doing it. Today, they do. I'll stop talking because next week, very exciting. We're going to go and see all of the lenient sides, and you're going to fall in love with me once again. We're going to start with Rav Menashe Klein and see what Rav Menashe Klein says. He takes the very lenient side, and he passed away in 1989, which is already a time when we already started seeing ways of being lenient. We are going to see Rav Weiss, who is the Minchas Yitzchak, and we are going to see a great called Rav Shmuel Halevi Vosner. So Rav Vosner was from Poland and survived the Holocaust, and he ended up becoming a leading halachic authority in Bnei Brak. So it'll be very interesting to see what he says, because you know what, when you start having Orthodox poskim saying that practices are okay, because then they become mainstream, which means across the board we can all do what we need to do to help ourselves. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you for joining. It's always, I love sharing what I've learned and spending time with you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Marshall.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marshall.
Thank you, Marshall.
Yes, Shakov, Marshall. Have a great day, everyone.
Daisy, come.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Marshall.
Just a minute. Don't go away. Wait.
By the way, you should know, merger or no merger, I don't care what happens down there, or retire or not retire, I'm going to be continuing classes like this for the rest of my life. So I'll be teaching, I'll open up my own Zoom account, and I will always be doing these kinds of classes like this, always. It's something I love to do, and whatever I'm learning, I'm going to share. That's what I thought. It's no
Thank you,
good.
Marshall.
Marshall,
What?
Adele has a friend for Quincy.
I know the Bernadoodle.
Did you
That's
see her?
it.
She's here.
Yes, I do. Of course.
Show her again.
I love a
Yeah.
bird. I want to.
Daisy,
Yeah,
come.
That
Quincy-
Bernadoodle
Quincy to
eats
have a
more than
look.
I do.
Daisy, up.
We're gonna make a shidduch here. Get Quincy. to have a look.
Quincy's, he's too old. He only has half his teeth.
Well, yeah.
So Marshall, I have a challenge for you.
Okay.
What does the Bible say about pets?
Pets are fine, but you can't pat them on Shabbos. You can walk them and exercise them and feed them. You're not supposed to touch them for the sake of being its companion on Shabbat because it's muktzah. It might lead you to do other things.
Dancing.
I read the
Dance
Torah. I
with your
didn't find
dog.
pets in there.
Yeah. No, it doesn't say pets because animals were utilitarian. I want to see the dog again. You didn't get to show me enough.
Oh, Daisy,
Yeah.
come.
Where's the
You
doggy?
have to have a look.
Oh,
There she is.
Daisy,
what's
come.
the dog's name?
Daisy.
Oh, hi, Daisy.
Come say hi.
Smile for the
Say
camera.
hi. Say hi. Look.
Oh, if you blow up the screen, like I made my picture bigger, now I see Daisy big.
See Daisy?
Oh, what-
If I talk, you can see her big. Say hi, Daisy.
Daisy looks like a Portuguese water
I
spaniel.
know everybody asks if she's a porty, but she's not.
She's a
But
good
her
girl,
mouth,
very
it looks like
quiet.
she's smiling.
Yeah.
She's
Can you
happy
say
to see
hi?
Vivian's 80,
Say
right?
hi.
We had to bribe her. Now it's gonna cost us a dozen cookies.
Can I know her? I'll voice the hint.
It's a beautiful dog.
Yeah,
She's very good, actually.
yeah.
Ah, well, that's my new grandchild.
The hairy one.
They're always happy to see you.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
thank
Okay,
you very
everyone.
much.
Thank
Marshall,
you.
thanks. Very good.
Go ahead.
Everybody have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Good to see everybody. Thank you very much.